Hey everyone, thanks for what do I say? I don't even know what I say. I don't have a regular thing that I say.
Well, you should.
I should, right? I probably should. Welcome to the Bill Martinez Show. My name is Bill.
And
We
my
got
name
a
is
guest with
Priscilla Flores
us.
Rodriguez.
Say your name again. I was talking over you.
Priscilla Flores Rodriguez.
All right. How long have we known each other? I was thinking about that today. I'm like, man,
10?
you don't think longer than that,
No, it's been longer.
right? I don't want to admit how long. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, it's been 15.
Probably, I would say.
A little more than that.
Feels like that. Let's see.
Yeah,
Oh my
so
god,
I was
longer
in my
than
early
that.
20s.
Longer than that.
I was in my early 20s.
It had to be longer than that, I
It was
think.
just yesterday.
Is this yesterday? Okay. Okay. We've known each other for a while. You want to explain how we've known each other for a while?
Well, it was
Okay. You can say whatever you want to say. Don't
uh,
go too deep, but just like
okay,
a
yeah.
1 minute, 2 minute summary
An
kind of thing.
ex-boyfriend's family's family.
Oh, you were going to go there. Okay. I wasn't expecting that. All right. Could have just met through a friend. I mean, I was expecting that.
True. But it was like his cousin is your cousin, so that it was through.
Yeah. Kind of that. Kind of that, yeah. So, yeah, we remain in contact somewhat throughout the years. And you reached out to me, I guess it was last week, right?
Yeah.
So what's on your mind?
I was like, I got a story. It's juicy.
Share.
No, so I noticed that you were still doing your podcast, and I have a story just like everybody else does. And so in my head, I'm thinking like, man, I just want to get this story out. I want to share my story. But I also know it's more than just that. Like, it's also just kind of sharing some enlightening, if you will,
Okay.
that I'm coming across. And then my hope is just to encourage anyone else that may be going through a healing from a traumatic experience.
Okay.
Emotionally traumatic experience.
Okay. Wow. That's very kind of you. So tell us a little bit about the story, whatever you can, whatever you can.
Yeah, so I was part of a church community for about 9 years. And from the church community, there was a need for a staff member who happened to have like the skill sets that I have. And so I said yes to taking the job, thinking, why would I ever tell God no? And this is specifically around church.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was part of the staff for almost 2 years. And then I put in my notice. I gave a 6-week notice thinking that this was going to be the right thing to do for my church community. And I wanted to train someone and kind of transition, leaving the church into good hands or in a better place than when I got there. And the following week, I was let go.
Wow.
I signed an NDA in that, and I was accused of being divisive. And from there, I was
Causing rumors, I guess, or spreading rumors or something, or
well,
did they get explicit about what that means, or not really?
Yeah, so somewhat for sure. So it was like I saw too much, I said too much, and because I was being outspoken, it was, we're gonna just shut you up.
Wow.
And so in that, I was then removed from being a leader of a women's group, and then I was deleted from my profile was literally deleted from their
Okay.
database.
Wow.
So that's in a nutshell, but we can get into some of the specifics depending on where you want to start.
Wherever you want to start, because I don't know what you want to share. I don't know. That's the thing, is that I don't know what exactly to ask, because I don't know what you can talk about or not talk about.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious. I remember seeing you at a church one time.
Mm-hmm.
Was it that church?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I liked it there for the time I
know.
was going.
Me too.
Yeah.
I really liked it there.
I was actually gonna sign up for leadership or something like that.
Yeah.
I went through their training or whatever,
Yeah.
and they had me do like a personality testing where you fit. And then
Did you get teacher?
What's that?
Did you get teacher, pastor?
It said apostle. It said something like that. And I don't remember exactly what it said, but I remember seeing that and some other things. But that jumped out to me the most. Anyway, so I was like, what does that mean? Anyway, so, but yeah, I saw some of their requirements, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to say no if I'm gonna be honest about some of these things. So, you know.
Well, thank you. No,
Sure.
seriously, thank you, because it like protects the integrity of the ministry, and that's kind of like what got me into some of the things. Was seeing a lot. So so I started going there about 10 years, was a congregant, and I loved it there.
10 years ago, or?
Yeah, I started about 10 years
okay.
ago.
Dang, okay.
Yeah.
A lot of time has passed.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It wasn't as consistent until, it kind of built up, but 10 years was kind of like here and there. And then I was going through a bad breakup, and that led me into one of the programs that they had there. And so I was going more regularly. Then I'm now like immersed into the culture. And then after being a participant, I then was becoming a leader, and then into the program. And then I was leading small groups, and then into staff. And what always kept me at this church or at this place was a sense of community, and feeling like this is home. And so I even remember my my bachelorette party before I got married. It wasn't like the greatest time. It really wasn't like what I anticipated or expected. And when we drove in that Sunday, I just drove straight into church because I was like, I just want to be home. And that home for me was this church, the community, the people, where I felt loved, belonging. I felt a sense of comfort. So this was it for me, I thought. Then I was led by the Lord, or by the Spirit, to leave my day job, and so I was working
to work full time for the church.
I didn't know at first.
Okay.
Yeah, just I knew that I was called.
Kind of quit, kind of thing. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
And
that's
so
bold. That's a step right there.
Yeah.
That's a step.
And so I was just doing my best to be obedient. And when I left, I was like, well, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I just left my corporate job. Well, this insurance agency approached me. And so I got my license to be an insurance agent or insurance broker. And so the request, or the there was an opportunity that knocked on my door to come in and join the staff at the very church that I was attending. And at the moment I said, oh no, this couldn't be why I left the corporate job, because then I'd probably taking a pay cut, and I just spent, thousands of dollars to get this license. So I said no. And then come to find out, like, it was really hard to make money as a broker. Yes. And that's how we got like 100% commission with this company that I was with.
Wow.
But I knew, and I was doing all the right things, like making the calls I was supposed to, following up, and all this stuff. But I felt like that was almost like the Lord telling me, like, okay, you want to do it yourself, go for it. That's not why I called you. So almost a year later, or months later, I reached back out and I was like, hey, by chance, is that job still available? And they're like, no, there's a freeze. And I was like, dang. So I had to wait it out. But then it came back around. And that time I was like, I'm not going to say no to the Lord this time.
Okay.
And so there started to be like red flags for me, even early on.
How soon?
The interview.
Dang. Wow. Okay.
The interview. And I don't know if this is like normal for pastors to ask this, but the very last question that I was asked was, could you, I forgot exactly how it was worded, but could you fall in alignment with my leadership? So
I think that's pretty common. I think it also, it's not a good question to ask because it's a very intimidating question, you know, and I think it's supposed to come across as that, like, are you gonna be obedient to what I gotta say?
Yes.
That's in a nutshell. That's what it's saying.
Yes.
I don't think that's the right approach, but so anyway, he asked you that question.
Yeah. So I actually had
Don't question my authority, pretty much. Yeah.
Right. Right. And I was a little confused by that because I was like, well, haven't I been obedient to your leadership the past 8 years?
Mm-hmm.
You know, feeding into your ministry by being a leader here, participating.
Oh, so
in
you're 8 years
community.
deep in the church, and you're now.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
okay.
that's why I was kind of like, where did that even come from? Like, you're questioning me? What? But then
Yeah.
another thought was also, was that because I was a woman?
Okay.
And so I don't want.
I don't think necessarily would be because of
Okay.
that. Yeah.
And there were certain things that kind of came up later that I was like, is it because I'm a woman? So I think a little bit, but I think to your point, is
I've been asked that before. That's why. So.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. But you are a woman, right?
I am not. I am not. Sorry out there. Sorry out there. But I do get hit on by men from time to time, you know.
That's so funny. I was just joking. I've known Bill for a long time.
I know. I was like, where did that come from? I felt like you that day with the pastor, and I'm like, where did that come from? I'm like, say what?
I'm just nervous.
Oh, you are? Okay. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We're all, you know. I'm not gonna edit it, but you know, we're good. We're good. So go ahead. So let me turn this. I thought I had this thing off.
Yeah. So to me, I think it was the way that I probably received that question was almost like this doesn't feel necessarily right. And I have a friend of mine who actually got hired on the same time that I did, and she was also in the community. She was a volunteer and also led through groups, and so they hired both of us on at the same time. And after the interview, we both kind of shared notes like, did he ask you this? And how did you respond? And so she actually brought up the question to me.
That one.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And so that's why I'm like, maybe it's the way I received it, and then also just our conversation that took place. And so maybe it was not meant to, I don't know, intimidate.
Did you ask any men who were working there that they got asked that question?
No.
I'm not gonna lie. To me, that's kind of an insecure move.
Yeah.
That is. It's an insecure move, and make sure you're gonna. I don't need you to question the things I direct you and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that's why, like, it's only hindsight, right? That
Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, was that the first flag that I should have known something?
I don't know if it's enough to jump board that
Right.
fast, you know, but yeah, yeah, sure.
But
it's a
definitely
flag.
something for me. I was like, noted. Okay, like it always just stuck in the back of my head.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, I mean, a job is a job, and also I love what I'm doing. Like I remember being a volunteer and volunteering for many of the services, and there were 4 services, and I would be there all day, and just because I loved being in the community, I loved serving. And Allie and I, my friend, would often joke and say, like, I can't believe we get to do this all day. Like, wow, we should ask the Lord to let us quit our day jobs and come work for him. And I mean, then it happened. Then you're like, whoa, what did I ask for again? So, yeah. And then other things kind of started coming up. One of them being like there is a man who was caught masturbating in front of the church like an hour before we opened the doors.
That's not necessarily. Are you saying that he belonged to the church or just some guy?
He was. So
okay.
he was like one of our
members.
He was one of our street friends. He was one of our street friends. So he was a homeless friend.
Oh, okay.
Right. So he was a homeless friend.
I like that term, street friend.
Yes.
Right.
And he would frequent the church. And so it wasn't odd or unusual that he was there. It was just odd and unusual what he was doing.
Yeah, sure. So you said an hour before the church opened? Okay.
And so we ended up like...
That was outside?
That was outside.
Okay.
We ended up seeing him about an hour later when the doors are opening. And we were like, hey, you can't be here right now. What you did was inappropriate. And so we were kind of going back and forth. And when I say we, Allie and I were like, should we file a police report? And our safety team was, you need to file a police report. And then we got one of the cops that attend the church. So a cop friend was, what is the word when you're asking someone like for advice? Like, but he also advised us to file a police report. So then we took it to.
You need me to turn it off? I don't know if you're cold.
I am.
Oh, I'm gonna turn it off.
Sorry, but I'm also.
Keep talking.
Okay. So then we took it to our ministry manager, who was the pastor's wife, and she was insistent that we figure out a way to make it work that he could still attend the church.
Okay.
And everyone still be hunky-dory. But for me, I was not okay with that. I was pregnant at the time, so I'm thinking about my kids. I'm thinking about the children who attend. I'm thinking about the volunteers who have their children here.
That's a good point.
And so I'm thinking about those things.
As a man, I would have been like, whatever, as long as you don't. But you got a good point, though.
Right. And I'm like, if he's homeless, he could have done that in the ditch he was in that night. That's my thought. And so after being advised to file the police report, they did. And I wanted to talk about it in the staff meeting. And I wanted to talk about it to say, like, if this is the correct plan of action, so we don't have to wait next time. What should we have done differently? What could we do differently? How do we, not that you can necessarily prevent things like that happening, but what is the appropriate protocol? And the response that I got was, well, didn't you already talk about it? What more is there to say? And I was like, dang, okay, so I guess we're not talking about it as a staff. It was just us three women who handled it.
Yeah.
And so I was really disappointed, because I was like, man, do you not care to hear my point of view, or what I'm feeling? And if you don't care to hear what I'm feeling, then you definitely don't care about your volunteers, and you don't care about your congregation. So that for me was another thing that I was like, ugh. And then there was one person in particular where him and I would sometimes bump heads. You have two strong personalities coming up against each other. And a lot of the times I would try to just like bow out, like, okay, it's not worth it, Priscilla, just let it go. And he's the kind of person that just kept badgering, like, we just kept pushing it. And I started to see some like narcissistic traits within some of our leaders. Like, there was some gaslighting, like, I didn't say that. Like, no, you're making that up. Like, what? I literally heard you say that. Like, anyone else here hear that?
Yeah.
And so there are little things that were taking place. And again, I'm like, I don't know if it's just because I was in a toxic relationship and this is the tactics that he would use against me to have his way. But something about this is not right. And then I start noticing that there's a lack of accountability. So this person was able to raise his voice and yell to the pastor, and they're bantering back and forth, making everybody else feel uncomfortable, but no accountability. Okay, that sales relationship, got it. But it still was like, it's not okay. Like, there's other people here, guys. So there was a huge event that actually took place at the church that I organized and put together. And at the end of the event, it turned out that like there were so many missing pieces to this event. Like, I didn't know who was going to MC. I didn't know. And this was the first time I put together an event of this magnitude, of this size, not really knowing what I'm supposed to be doing. So it was kind of like, do this event and figure it out. Right. Wow. You're right. That can be overwhelming. Yes. And then it turned into, because there's thousands of little things that come into play. There are. And it was supposed to be a joint effort, but then it fell onto my plate. And so the lack of accountability. Like, these people were supposed to be here to help me plan, but they're not. And so now it's fallen on my lap. And they're paid staff as well? Or Oh, okay. Paid staff as well. And so the event came and went. There were a lot of successes within the event, so not to say that it was a complete disaster. But after the event, I was left thinking, like, how is this like a church event? Like, how is this glorifying God? Like, where does this come into play for the church? How is this benefiting the church?
Mm-hmm.
And when I asked that question, it was like, how dare you ask that question? I think leadership then, like, they talked about it. Another thing is that, like, the day before, I'm talking to the leadership, the staff, and I'm like, you're going to be here, right? And they're like, oh, no, I don't go events on Fridays. And I'm like, what? Like, what is this? Like, so I'm doing all of this, and for who again? Like, what are we doing? I'm missing the purpose. And it was the question of, like, what is the purpose behind it? What are we really doing? And so I really couldn't quite grasp onto that.
You never got an answer, I guess?
No. After they talked, they came back to say that that there were some points that I was making as far as, like, why are we doing this? And so I did feel validated in that. But then it was almost like a backhanded compliment, I guess, because it was like, because Priscilla, this isn't her forte. So it was so unfair for us to put that on her.
Ooh.
Okay.
Damn.
Yeah. Like, okay.
Let's embarrass her a little more.
Yeah. Like, okay, so this had nothing to do with the lack of support that I had. But okay. All right, I'll take it. And so then there was, like, new processes that were coming out that if there was going to be an event, then it had to go through appropriate channels. And so that way, every single event that we had within the church would fall under, like, the 4 pillars that we had. So we had, like, 4 things that we attempted to do within the ministry.
Okay.
And so if the event fell under one of those pillars, then great, it's a green light and it can go. If it didn't fall under one of these pillars, then we would try to divert it so that way we're not spending our resources onto something that is not under, like, it's not supporting our mission, which would make sense because any event that you do, you know, it costs money.
Yeah.
And who's paying for that? The congregation.
That's true.
And so, again, that's where my thoughts coming from is, like, why are we wasting our money doing this when we could have allocated those funds to something that actually fell into our mission, to be more mission driven. And so, man, I lost my train of thought, but that's where I was for a while. I also started noticing that there is one of their main programs that they have, and it's a ministry, and it's a great ministry. It's like to help people heal through any hang-ups or hurts that they've gone through, and helping to identify, like, the source of them, and then in turn finding healing in that. And it's a great program. But what I started noticing is that this program was being held onto a pedestal. And so with that, anyone who is involved in leading through the groups were kind of just held, like, a little higher than the rest of the people. And that's that, like, I was in this elite group, and then at some point they invited my husband to come back, but they didn't invite me to come back.
Oh.
And so my husband was like, well, I'm not going to do that. Like, if you want one of us, you have to take both of us. We're a package deal now.
Sure.
Like, yeah.
He's got my back.
Yeah. He's very loyal. But also, yeah, so I started noticing, like, a clique that was being formed in this elite group. And that's that, like, the clique was actually my friends. Like, these are my friends. I'm actually part of this clique, but also seeing it from the outside in, I'm like, ooh, I wonder how this looks to other people. Like, you can't get in unless you've gone through the program, you've done this and you've done that, and then you get to be part of it. And then it was like when I wasn't invited back, where maybe I had some hurt from that. Not maybe, but I did have some hurt from that. But also there were, I started seeing, like, this process that they had was no longer being followed. And so what I mean by that is that they started inviting leaders that did not go through the program, but have been through other similar programs. And it's not it's not my ministry on to say like you shouldn't be doing that, but because for a while it felt like we were all part of it, I felt comfortable enough to raise these questions or to bring it to the attention to say, why are we doing it like this? When if these are your rules, why are we just not following the rules? If this was what you said we had to do, why?
So you think they were showing favoritism, I suppose?
Yes.
Okay.
Showing some favoritism. And then I would get irked because I would hear like the leaders say like, oh, I can't even open up my Bible. It's just so hard. And to each their own, right? Like, I get it. Reading is not for everyone. But if you are leading people in a Christ-centered program, my question then is like, who or what are you leading people to if you don't even know the word for itself? Another question to bring up, right? So what I started noticing was that there was like a lack of discipleship going around. But
that's got, in my experience, discipleship has got to be the hardest ministry to maintain. First of all, to initiate, because a lot of people don't want to disciple.
Right.
But then if you do disciple, then it's extremely difficult to maintain.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
Discipleship has got to be like one of the most difficult ministries to initiate. And on top of that, to maintain, because there's no glory in discipleship. There's zero glory.
Right.
And the funny thing is, that's about all that and spreading the word. But discipleship has got to be one of the first things Christ wanted his followers to do. Make disciples.
Go and make disciples.
Yeah. And that's probably one of the least implemented things in the church, to be honest with you. And I've always seen that in my time serving in the church, is that how come there's not discipleship programs? How come this? How come that? And so I didn't care. I did care, obviously. I cared. But it didn't stop me from doing it. But it's a very non-glorious part of ministry, and that is most likely why it's not practiced more in the church, because there's no glory involved.
I would agree with that.
It's the unsung heroes,
right?
I
would most definitely agree with that, because in the
there's no spotlight either.
So in this program, though, as the leader, you are spotlight. Like, you are in the spotlight.
Absolutely.
Because you are now, look at what you're doing. How amazing is it? And so those were the things that I started noticing. I'm like, whoa, this isn't the way, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Like, it's not supposed to be that way. And
that's where the favoritism comes in, and the politics and all that other stuff.
Right, exactly. So, I just saw a lot of
cliques as well start to form and things like that,
Right. And so, that's part of like the narcissistic system.
Yeah.
And so that's where, now being outside of a church, not necessarily having like a church home right now, like, that's one thing that I can say is that, like, I was part of that I was part of that system. I was part of that narcissistic system, because it does feel good to see people transformed. It does feel good to know that I'm part of something bigger and greater. But also that's where it's okay to be prideful in what you are doing, but it's not okay to be prideful for doing the things where you start taking some of the glory out from the Lord, and you get a little bit more. And so even in the program, I started noticing it was going bigger. More secular things were being included, more being led by the flesh, because it's stuck with me, that one
Break
leader.
break down what you just said for those people that aren't in church, because you're using church words.
Ooh.
Okay, so you said more secular things, more things of the flesh. What does that mean for somebody who's not in church?
Secular being things that are not of the church, so more like worldly things. Flesh, we are all made flesh. We also all have the Holy Spirit residing in us for those who have accepted Jesus Christ. Without Jesus Christ, we are fully engulfed into the world, and so our flesh gets pulled in by the world.
And I guess by flesh, you mean just more selfish characteristics, I suppose?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And by secular or worldly, I suppose you mean more things that are not Christ-centered?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, so hopefully y'all can kind of understand that kind of talk, church talk right there. But go ahead. You started to notice more secular and worldly things coming into the church.
Yeah. And so I've always thought, like, let the world point to the world. If we are the church, we should be pointing to Christ. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I am beyond perfect. I fail all the time. Even this morning, I failed. So I'm not trying to say that I am. It's just I'm saying that I've seen these things, and I'm not to say that I'm supposed to be the one, the hero in any of it, but my eyes have seen it. It's been exposed to me. And I always feel like when you're exposed to something, you have two options. It's always, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to take responsibility and walk forward into whatever it is whatever it is to make it right? Or you're going to turn a blind eye. So anytime you're given, like, the family secrets, what are you going to do with the family secrets?
Yeah.
And so I've always been very cautious. Like, once I started seeing that, I was cautious of, like, okay, who do I share this with? Who could pray with me in this? And so I would turn to the prayer team, but still there were a lot of things that I couldn't share because of my role on staff.
Oh, okay.
Which was another thing, is that before coming on staff, I was on the prayer team, serving as one of the prayer leaders. And my first week on the job, all excited, I was pulled to the side and was told, "You are no longer a prayer leader." I was like, "What?" "You are no longer a prayer leader. You are now staff." And I couldn't understand how to separate the two, because I'm like, that's all I do is pray. What do you mean? I don't know. I couldn't understand.
Never got an answer for that? No?
No.
That's an interesting thing to tell you, you know?
Yeah.
I wonder what the reasoning for that is.
I think
What do you
think there's a hurt there from the main pastor, from a prayer leader who maybe spoke too much. You know, a lot of people will use their giftings against others. Like, if you have a gift of prophecy, which means that you get to see things that either have not transpired yet, or things that have happened that no one else could know, right? And I think at times, us being the flesh, being more driven by our desires, I think we convolute the two at times.
The crazy thing is that you don't even have to be gifted to use something to your advantage, like scripture. You could twist it.
Right.
You know, as long as you know enough to twist it, you can use that.
Right.
You know, to manipulate people.
Yeah. So I think that there was a hurt there from someone who maybe prophesied. Maybe they were wrong, or maybe they called him out. I don't know.
You don't think maybe they just gave him a biblical passage and he didn't like that either?
I don't know. Maybe. And I only think that because there would be a few times where he would make mention of it. Yeah, I have people coming up to me and tell me all the time. And I can only imagine being a pastor where you do have people coming up to you saying, like, I was praying for you and the Lord told me, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely. Everybody's got their opinion and input. Yeah.
Right. So I can understand being guarded, or, test all the spirits is what the scripture says.
After a while, just like, all right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think even
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. And then you move about your day, you know.
Let me just kiss some babies real quick.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd imagine so.
Yeah, so that was another thing that was like just very weird to me. Like I'm no longer on the prayer team. But I still found myself on Sundays going to the prayer team and leading people through prayer. And I do think and feel that the community appreciated the fact that even being on staff, that I was still rubbing elbows. I was still spending time with them. I was still.
Let me ask you this. Don't lose your train of thought, but you might. So, when you become at that church, when you became part of the staff, typically were most staff members not
Involved?
involved with new people or members that were not staff? Or
No, so staff was typically just involved with whomever their ministry fell under. So, for example, we had a pastor who was assigned to the small groups. So he would know the people within the small groups. Then you had the ministry.
you mean the teachers, I guess? Or
Yeah.
okay, and that's about it? Mm-hmm. So that was his circle then?
Right.
Same thing for every other ministry.
Mm-hmm. Worship art director. So he only knew
Pretty much isolation.
Correct.
So they don't still rub shoulders with or hang out with those, get to know those that are new, or
Correct.
just anybody in the church, really.
Right.
It's easy to lose touch.
For sure. And I mean, there'd be many times where we would see the pastor just go straight into his car right afterward. And sometimes I get it. Like, I understand that it's a lot, like, on any one person. You know, sometimes we are stuck in our own minds, let alone now I have to go and put on for everyone else who thinks that this pastor is the savior, so to speak.
That's the thing, is that if you're in that position, that leadership position, and you feel like you have to put on a show, it's obviously a sign of burnout, exhaustion, maybe just taking a break, a little hiatus or something, some kind of a break to where you can regather yourself, because my time leading the church, there's nothing worse than turning ministry into work. There ain't nothing worse than that, because now you're not doing it for the passion. Now you're not doing it for the Lord. Now you're doing it just to... It just becomes, what's the word I'm trying to think of? You're just going through the motions.
Yeah.
You're just clocking hours. Yeah, you're just, let's do this again. Another Sunday, another whatever day,
Yeah. So I think that you're right about that. There's also, I think, ways where
but here's the thing. Let me tell you something, okay? I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
That's where I find that there's faulty in a lot of church leadership setup, is that everything relies on one. It shouldn't all rely on one. Mm-hmm. There should be maybe a small community, maybe 3, maybe 2 leaders or 3 leaders or something like that, to where they can take breaks, they can rotate, they can share the load, so that way they can regather themselves. I mean, you look into the Bible and you look at the Gospels. Christ had a short ministry.
Right.
It's believed he had maybe, I think, 3 years or 4 years, something like that. I think I've always heard 3. Let's assume it's 3. He got exhausted too, just with those 3 years. And he wasn't even leading a church. He was just preaching and teaching.
Well, that is
the
church.
Well, not in America, at least.
Right.
Okay. Not in America.
Yeah.
It's a very capitalistic system, the church, the way it's organized. It's organized like a business in America.
Yeah.
And I personally don't think those two mix, because those are very different concepts. The concept of a church and then the concept of business. And those are 2 completely different things. And for you to try to run a church, in my opinion, For you to try to, and who am I to say anything? But in my opinion, I think that's why there's a lot of corruption in some churches. And there's a lot of selfishness in a lot of churches and a lot of ego in a lot of churches because it's mixed with money and ego. And sure, you can have ego outside of capitalism, no doubt about it. You see that in the Bible, in the book of Acts, and in different other books in the Bible, in the New Testament. But it is a breeding ground when you mix capitalism in the church. It's a breeding ground for narcissistic behavior, egocentric behavior, selfish behavior, favoritism, politics, all of that stuff. It's a breeding ground for that because you're bringing something that is not of Christian or church origin into the church. And now you're trying to do your best to blend them together. What's more important, people or money?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And when it comes down to it, you're going to know what's more important by the decisions that the church makes overall.
Yeah. So I think that's what I was seeing is
that. That.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a book that I read, When Narcissism Comes to the Church and How to Heal It. And what you just said, it's a breeding ground for it. The author lists that out. And it was very insightful because it allowed me to even take a look at what narcissistic traits that I have, because what I've learned is that all of us kind of carry some of those traits.
Sure, absolutely.
It's just a matter of
how much.
Right, how much. Because if it's like a great amount where you really are a narcissist, the chances for a narcissist of turning around is very slim. And in this book, the author is a psychologist, and he works with churches with permission who will sit with the pastor, a narcissistic pastor, and help kind of unpack the narcissistic traits, and one by one help in bringing healing perspective for the pastor.
Interesting.
And
while he's on staff, while he's still leading?
Yeah. Well, no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't know, actually, because one of the pastors said that he was forced to take some time off.
Because that's the only way I can imagine seeing it happen. Right. Because it's a paradigm shift in the way you speak to people, the way you lead people, the way you treat people, the way you serve people. It's completely different.
The way you look at people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in the book, it took me a little bit to process because I'm still in the healing journey of it. I'm 6 months off, and I can only imagine, I'm even looking forward to even 6 months from now having a small difference in my perspective from even now, because I'm pretty dedicated right now in putting in the work to find the healing, because I'm like, man, the faster that I get the healing, the more I can actually do what I'm supposed to be doing, loving on others and doing it well. Because when you're going through it, the healing, it's hard to love others well. And I'll get back to that point in just a second.
Yeah, I could talk about that too as well, whenever you get back to it. Go ahead.
But in this book, the very last chapter is what really gave me hope. And he said he had one of the first pastors that said yes to the program. And he said, you work with the pastors and you don't always see the fruit of it, because these are things that take time to heal and to see like the return of your investment.
Absolutely.
And he said 10 years later, the pastor wrote him a letter and told him, thank you, that was the greatest decision that he was ever forced to make, basically. And it gave me hope into like, man, there are pastors who are willing to do the hard work. And so it gave me hope. And it was one of those also heartbreak of like, if only that pastor would be willing. Because since it happened in my anger, I think justifiably I could say, I want this, I want that, I want them to feel the pain, I want them to fall, all this stuff. But really what I would really truly desire is a repentant heart. And not necessarily for just my sake, but I'm not the only one who's been through this from this church.
I'm sure.
There are others. There's a whole support group.
Dang.
It's called a text message, they said.
Wow.
A text thread.
That many people.
Well, right? You only need 2 people in a text.
That's true. I guess you're right. If not, you're sending it to nobody, right?
But I can tell you that there's at least 3 people who have experienced this. And so, yeah, it's nuts. So I'm thinking like the pain that I feel is also the pain that they felt. So I felt like it was like just a...
What's your biggest question of all that experience? How can God still use him? Or what's your biggest like question of that kind of baffles you? Is there one or...
Like about the whole situation?
Yeah. Or about that leader, like how can you call yourself a Christian or are you saved? How can you be saved? Like,
yeah.
How can you be used by, like, what's your biggest question?
I think my biggest question is just, like, do you not see the pain?
No.
Is really my question. Because I know how one could be considered a Christ follower and hurt others. I mean, I've done it. You've done it. Mm-hmm. So I know that. I know that we're not perfect. We're led by imperfect people. So I know that and I understand that. I get that. But it's, I guess, okay, this is the question is more of like, well, who's holding him accountable? Who does he answer to? And then the question behind that is, why isn't anyone saying anything?
Maybe they all sign
I
certain
know.
thing,
That's the thing. I'm like, oh yeah, that's...
Now,
that's
are you forced to sign something like that? Or do you sign it because you're going to get a financial benefit,
Right. You get a financial benefit.
Okay.
We're going to have you sign this and we'll pay you out, for whatever. Thank you for your time.
Wow.
And it's like, dang, it's like that, huh? And then you have only seconds to make the decision. Like,
why? What's going to matter if you walk away?
I don't know.
They just withhold the money, I guess?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
That's about it. So they say.
Right.
So they say.
Well, they also say that they would sue me for the money back if I told my story.
Oh,
and so,
okay.
Yeah.
Do we have to put an emoji face on you the whole time? Or?
Well, then I'm like, oh yeah, we'll come back and sue me.
Because then everybody will know your dirty laundry.
Exactly. That's my thought process. I'm like, oh yeah, well then you're just admitting, your own guilt there. Mm-hmm. And then, I had a thought right there. It's gonna come back to me because it's something I think about.
Okay. Okay. So, a moment ago you were talking about how you want to help people, but you feel like you have to go through this healing process. Is that something you're struggling with, not being able to help people? Is it?
To some degree, for sure.
Yeah.
Because...
do you feel like a bad Christian for not helping people?
No, I don't feel like a bad Christian for not helping people. But I feel like it's kind of grown into part of my identity, right? Part of like who I am.
You mean as far as a helper, I guess, or
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, like
so you don't feel like you're fulfilling your identity,
correct,
okay,
or
all right.
my purpose, I guess. And so, like, I know I'm a teacher of the word, and so I'm not doing that right now. And so there's part of me that's like, I miss it. I want to have some type of position where I can pour into others. I find fulfillment in that, but then also I'm in no rush to like go right back into ministry. I have a ministry at home, my first ministry, and that's my daughter. And so I'm very thankful for that. But then also remembering the narcissistic traits, right? Why do I really want to be a teacher? Is it because like I was known, because I was seen, or is it really because I'm doing
because people look up to me?
Right, exactly. So there's also the unraveling, if you will, of that mindset, and just finding myself to be a little bit more
it's an
humble.
Interesting dynamic when you are in a position of leadership, especially for some time, whether it be months or years. The longer you're in it, the more narcissistic it can get if you don't do proper checks and balances.
Right.
You know, because the attention can get appealing or attractive. The admiration definitely can be something that gets to your head. Anything to where you're at a place of authority, it can get to your head, you know, if you're not careful with it, you know.
Yeah. So that's also part of the inward of like, okay, maybe this was part of God's mercy, and to say, hey, check, you're getting a little ahead of yourself. Because ultimately it's not supposed to be who knows me, but who knows Christ. And so I have to make sure that I get out of my way. And
I mean, a great way to humble yourself is to pray in your name and see what happens.
No.
I tried it.
Oh gosh.
I had to check myself. Nothing happened. I felt nothing. Nothing happened in the prayer. It was just a brick just dropped, you know, like nothing. I threw a rock up and it came right back down. You know, that was humbling, you know?
Yeah, I'd be pretty scared. And I'm like, I'm sorry, Lord.
It's not like you're going to get struck by lightning. It's going to be like, whatever. Yeah, let me see something happen with your name. Let me see. You know, it's like that. That's how I saw it, you know?
True. Very true.
Because I think Christ does have a sense of humor, especially with those that have a genuine relationship with him.
Yeah.
But I'll go back to the healing part and wanting to serve people part. There's been some times where I had to go through a healing process myself, and I've had other people, not saying that you're asking me this question, but other people have asked me this question when they've been having to heal through something, and they feel kind of guilty about it, like almost like they're being selfish that they have to take some time to their self. And you know, they're like, well, what do you think about this? And I said, well, you're supposed to be selfish. And they're like, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, how many times did Christ leave the crowd and his disciples to take care of himself?
Yeah.
So many times in the Gospels.
He did that often.
So many times. Not only that, you look at before Jesus started his ministry, in my eyes, he was selfish. He had all this power, but the time wasn't at hand yet, you know, according to the Bible. So to me, I'm like, man, you're being selfish. You ain't sharing this power, you know. But if you think about it, it's like, well, he had to get things right with himself. Then you go to the Apostle Paul. You can even go to Moses. But let's go to the Apostle Paul since we're in the New Testament. When Paul got converted, he spent 3 years in the wilderness. He ain't serving nobody, but he's got to take time for himself.
Right.
Himself and Christ. You go to Moses, same thing, 40 years in the desert. That's for himself. You see, so when I say selfishness, that's what I mean is like you can't give what you don't have. And
Exactly.
if you need healing, then you got to be healed so you can give healing.
Right.
You know, and I tell people all the time. And that's the proper response. Sure, you can be an arrogant jerk and think that I mean selfish when I say selfish, like the way most people think, you know, only think of yourself and nobody else. I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to self-love, self-worth, self-validation. So just taking care of yourself. Because if you don't take care of yourself, who's going to take care of you? You know?
Absolutely. I think maybe my perspective has kind of changed now that I'm a mom, in that, like, I know that I have to be okay, because if I'm not okay, then she's not going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so that's why I have no rush into it. And I know when the time is right, then something's going to come, and I'll be able to pour into others, and I'll be able to share what this healing journey has been like, because I know that I know that he has not ever left me. He, being Holy Spirit and Jesus, have not ever left me through this, because the very first question was, why did it have to happen like this? Like, why, Lord? Like, I wanted to be able to tell my volunteers and spend time with my volunteers, honor them for the work that they have given towards this ministry to help me be successful in my job. I wanted them to know how much I cared about them. And so I felt like I was robbed of that. The enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And I felt like he tried to kill my spirit, destroy my relationship, and rob me of those blessings. And so it was, why did it have to happen this way? Followed by, Lord, let my heart be willing to forgive them. Because I knew that me, myself, my flesh, I don't want to forgive them. And so even saying, Lord, let my heart be willing, I felt like he was saying like that, I just need your willing heart. And so that's where the journey has been. It's been spending time with him, crying it out, allowing those questions to come up and not being afraid to ask them out loud. Not being afraid to say, Lord, I'm angry. I'm pissed. Lord, I'm pissed. I'm so angry. Yeah, so I love that I serve a gentle God where he's just like, I can take it. I can take it. And part of my anger, I also feel is some of his righteous anger too, where the things that I'm seeing, like the Lord flipped over the table, in Matthew, where it says that in the temple he flipped over the tables because he's looking at his temple like, what have you done with this place? Like this all right here, people should be praying right here, and you guys are selling things, you guys are taking advantage of people.
A business,
right? You formed a business. What is this? And so I do feel that, but also going back to being able to love people well is because this was my community, my home, my safe place, all of these people who make up the body of Christ or the church. These are my friends. And it's like, man, my friends are still in there. I'm not even supposed to go and worship in the same place where my friends are.
They're not allowed back in?
Well, I'm sure I am.
Okay.
But also, that would take me maybe humbling myself, but also...
You're like, that's out of the question right now.
It's definitely, as we get about a year. But, I mean, it's also like I'm done playing fake, too.
Okay.
I'm done playing fake.
You're done pretending.
I'm done pretending. So I feel like if I were to see them, they would very quickly and easily be like, oh, hey, we love you, we miss you. And I'm going to be like, you love me so much, but you let me go? You love me so much, but you cut me out of the family?
Yeah.
You accused me of bringing division?
Yeah.
But you love me?
Yeah.
If you truly did love me, then why didn't you sit me down and say, Priscilla, why does this bother you? Because you didn't care. You wanted to protect self.
You were disposable.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And that's what hurts a lot.
Yeah.
Is that they think like that.
Yeah.
When it's supposed to be a loving family, they're like, toss you.
So those who have those who went before me, those who were let go before me, they had just cut off communication from the community completely. Blocked people from social media, no phone calls, no text messages, just that's it.
Yeah.
And my personality is just a little bit different. And I'm like, I just can't. Like, these are people that I genuinely love, people that have seen me in my most vulnerable and have ministered to me, and vice versa. We go to birthday parties together. We do Christmas together. So this is more than just, church family. This is family. We're doing life together. And so, talk about being a bigger person and being humble, but to not hold them accountable for the hurt that I was feeling, because they still attend to that church, because they're still involved in the ministries that I know and I see that are not necessarily of God's will or desire. in some aspects. And so that's been a hard struggle. I think that's been one of the hardest things, to be able to still have friends that are in there and maintain those relationships.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, the healing process is interesting because, especially if you still want to live for God despite the pain the church might have caused, or leadership, I should say. Um, during those times myself, I've learned some things about God. I've learned a lot of things about myself, a lot of things about people, and just figuring out, okay, what do I want to do with that?
Yeah.
That's really what it is. What do I want to do with that? Do I want to still serve God, or say to hell with this? If God is allowing these things to happen, then what's the point? Things along those lines. And I know a lot of people respond with what's the point thing, but yeah, like you said, people are imperfect. As long as people are involved, there's going to be imperfection, and but where's the accountability? Yeah, where's the accountability? Yeah, so wow.
Yeah. Shortly after my departure, the lead pastor reached out to say that if I would be willing, that he would have his therapist reach out to me, and I could share with his therapist some of the things that I think that he could do better, or the church could do better. And I was really hesitant about even sharing that with this therapist, because the therapist is also, I don't know if he's on the board of.
Oh, a really close connection like that.
Right.
Wow.
And so I'm thinking,
Dang,
how
that's
is this
sticky.
person going to hold them accountable? Because from my understanding is that before the pastor can make any big decisions, that he should be going to his accountability board and seek guidance. At least that's what we were told is supposed to happen. And I'm thinking, how many people that actually know me had the say to let me go? Like, who gave the green light to this? And why? Like, what is being said about me? How am I being portrayed? Because I don't think I'm a bad person. I mean, I truly do just love people. And so that was like my question is, okay, so if I tell this person these things, I mean, nothing really can happen to me. I'm already let go. But is anything truly going to change? And so I did finally say, because then I was like, well, I don't want to walk away and say, at least I told someone. What he does with that information from then on is between him and God. I mean, my good friend still works there. I don't see that things have changed. I just see that things have gotten worse.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I found that to be weird that was even approached or brought up, because I'm like, what's in it for this guy? Like, he doesn't even live here in San Antonio. He lives in another city. So what is it to him if I say these things? And I'm just one person saying these things. I think they were supposed to do an interview with 2 others, but I mean, our time is really short. It was 30 minutes. And within 30 minutes, I can't share. And I had like detail. I had dates. I had times. I had situations.
Wow.
That I actually shared to the lead pastor, and nothing was done. I was let go. And so, yeah, I'm like, I felt like it was a false humility of like, yeah, I'll let them, and I'll hold myself accountable. I promise I will. But I'm like, yeah, I mean, I know now I'm on the outside looking in, but I still have insiders who are, and I'm not seeing like a change. And in fact, I see a lot of hurt still going on. And because I'm seeing that hurt, and because very few know the hurt that I've gone through, they find like safety in to be able to share.
To you.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure. I bet.
So yeah, my husband actually ran into the pastor not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, and he like ran up to him and, Joe Gabriel, we love you, we miss you. And my husband, very loyal, right? He just shook his hand and just said, good to see you, and walked away. And instantly I was like fueling inside once I learned of this interaction, because I'm like, oh, this guy, like, who does he think he is, like, to play fake because other people were there.
Oh.
The next day we go to and this time I'm with my husband, and we get to a gathering at a restaurant. So we get down and everybody sees us, we're saying hi, and it's been a little bit since I've seen some of these people, and I learned that the lead pastor is there, and I'm like, I can't do it. I'm not there. I cannot sit here and play fake. I'm too riled up. And so we ended up leaving. A couple of days later, the pastor reaches out to my husband and says, like, hey, it was great to see you. Just so you know, I'd be open to talk, but no rush, no pressure. And in my head, I mean, two things. Like, one is like, yeah, okay. Yeah, maybe he is open to talk. But also, that was the same text message that he sent to me the same day that my co-leaders were instructed that I was to no longer lead in the women's group. So I was never even told that I shouldn't lead into the women's group. He left it up to my co-leaders to give me that bad news, to say, oh yeah, by the way, you can't sit with us today. What? Like, it's the same message that he sent me. Why didn't he just tell me? Like, why didn't he call me? Why didn't he pick up the phone? And so I just saw it to be very superficial, and like, okay, so people saw us get there, people also saw us leave, and people also know that I'm not at that church anymore. So I think that it brought attention to the tension. Maybe it was ever so brief. Maybe for some it never even crossed their minds, but those that are closest to us knew it and felt it. And so I basically was taking it to the Lord, and he brought me into the scripture where he talks about the Pharisees, of how the outside of their cup is clean and nice, but inside of their cup is dirty. And I was like, ooh, yeah, no, unless I felt like there was like a true compassion or a true trueness to that, like, I just can't, because then it would be talking to nothing or no one. Like, we would get nowhere.
Be talking to a Pharisee.
Right. And so I was like, man. So I just prayed about it, and I said, okay, Lord, if it's from you, then it's not going to be just Joe Gabriel and the pastor. It's going to be the pastor, his wife, us two, and a third party, to kind of mediate in between. So I think that that's fair. And in fact, I think it's biblical even. And that was another question that I had, is like, they skipped through all of these steps, Lord.
Wow.
Because when
I remember the first time I was offended by a leader, I was like, wait a minute. I did the same thing the first time, yeah. I was like, after the first time, though, it was happening so many times I forgot about the steps.
The order to it, right?
Yeah, I just forgot about it. I'm like, you know what? I think they're all assholes. I'm supposed to be okay with that? I don't think so. I don't think so,
Yeah, so like, they skipped all these steps, which is, if you have a problem with someone, then you go and talk with them.
Yeah.
If they don't listen, you bring someone else in. If they still don't listen, then you share it with a bigger audience. And so I'm like, well, technically, Lord, where are we in this? Like, and where do I fall into this? And
man, you're getting technical.
I'm like looking for these technicalities within the word, right? But
only if churches operated like that, there'd be a lot less problems.
I would think so. So yeah, that's kind of where I landed on that meetup. Like, no, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen on my terms, because I left on their terms, and unless the Lord tells me otherwise, and that's just been my motto in that. Unless the Lord tells me otherwise.
Yeah. Wow. So you've been 6 months out. So how has the healing process gone? Like, where are you?
Depressed.
Really?
Yeah. I think also I've struggled with postpartum depression. My daughter's now 18 months. And I think that this only kind of triggered some of those emotions that
Or
I might
enhances,
have.
maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Enhance the emotions that I was already feeling. And so maybe about a month ago, my husband was like, I feel like you're always sad or you're always mad. Because I am sad and I am mad.
You're like, yup.
Guilty as charged. Thank you for noticing.
You're very
Nancy
perceptive.
Drew. Like,
Now what? I feel like you're always happy.
I feel like you always filled with joy. Why are you smiling so big? Yeah, my poor husband, because he has to live with me.
Oh my! Don't say that.
But yeah, so we back to like the loving people, not holding them accountable. We had booked a cruise with.
What you mean not holding them accountable? What you mean by that?
I still need to take this with the Lord. Well,
you gotta hold people accountable. What do you mean?
So
help me understand what you mean by not holding people accountable.
So, not holding my friends accountable to the actions of their pastor.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. But part of it is like, well, now you know this information. Now what are you gonna do?
Pick a side.
What are you gonna do? Well, not in so many words. I never said that.
That's what you're saying, though.
Okay, so
I read between the lines.
One of my really good friends, that's how he was perceiving it, and I get it because it does hurt my heart to see that, right? Because really, what I want is for them to be like, you know what, we're leaving too, and that actually happened in the beginning where this couple were like, you know what, we're gonna leave with you. Like, what?
And they were in leadership as well, or staff?
They weren't staff. They were in leadership.
Okay.
And I was like, what? No, you can't do it for me. You have to be led. If
maybe that's how your friends feel.
Yes. So that's what I've come to understand too, right? Is that I can't just tell people like, this is what happened. Now what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? Right? Like, that's so unfair to them that I'm not doing anything differently than what was already done to me. And so I didn't like that part of my healing process because it was such an ugly place to be, to love my friends, but also hate at the same time some of the things that they were doing or lack thereof. And so when I had this conversation with this couple, it was, okay, look, I get it. Like, if you are called to stay there, then you are called to stay there. But what I'm looking for, and I don't know who is responsible for this, I feel like I've been like searching, is, this information. Why isn't anyone telling the pastor, hey, your foundation is shaky. Hey, is something going on? How can we help you? We as the leaders are seeing these things that are taking place and people are getting hurt.
You really don't think nobody's saying anything to them?
I really don't think people are saying anything.
Really? Wow. That's surprising. If I find that hard to believe, though.
Or maybe it's because the reason why I don't think that is because I don't see any change. But then at the same time...
Yeah, but that's the ego. That's the ego. That's how strong the ego is,
Yeah.
It's like, whatever. They're just going through whatever.
Well,
Who are they,
I did later find out that that friend of ours, he did talk to the pastor and kind of said like, hey, we're noticing these things. Maybe you should keep your eyes open.
And then they justify things a lot, Yeah. That's another thing about leadership. Is that
absolutely. And so hearing that, my friend,
they're the sinner, not me. It's very Pharisaic, you know?
Right. Well, that's kind of like, the text message. What was the point of the text message? So that way he could go and say like, well, I tried, but they don't receive it. They just won't take my call. They won't respond to me. What am I supposed to do? Admit that you're a jerk ass? Like,
yeah.
if you are listening right now,
that message was for you.
directly for you.
Taking shots.
And I won't say your name out loud
Yeah.
for protection
For protection.
of mine. For my own protection. And so I later learned that that he did, and he didn't admit it to me, but his wife shared that with me, and I felt like validated, like vindicated, of like he heard me. Because in that same conversation that we were having, my friend was like, I feel like you're asking me to pick sides. I'm like, no, I'm not. I can't ask you to pick sides, because there aren't any sides. It's just Jesus. Right. So I'm trying to keep my focus on just that. And when I told him, like, I'm just looking for someone to tell him, like, hey, your foundation is jacked up, like, as your brother, as your, follower, whatever. But
Let me ask you something. If you think he was open to that, do you think all those flags would have been raised in your experience?
like, if he was open to hearing that before.
Or just in general?
Well, I think that's why I feel like those people are no longer there. Yeah.
Goes back to the last question he asked you in the interview, right? You're going to fall in love with my authority or not?
Yeah.
And that's a very, that's probably a narcissistic question to ask, now that I think about it. Because what they're pretty much saying is, if there's something you don't like, you still need to fall in line.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, I
don't even tell my kids that. And I got to say so. But I don't even tell my kids that. I'm like, if you see like if you see that I'm over responding or overreacting in some way, or I'm not understanding where you're coming from, tell me.
Yeah.
Because I want to be a better parent for them. And some leaders don't want to be better leaders. They just want to be listened to, and when I point, you go.
Right.
Yeah.
The day before I was let go, there was like a big blowout in a staff meeting, and of course I was the center of that. But because I was calling out bullshit for what it is, and calling out lies, and to my face being lied to, and I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Wow.
Like, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
But the main pastor raised his voice, and I was like, you know what? My husband doesn't raise his voice at me. What gives any other man any kind of right or permission to do that? I mean, I'm sure my dad yelled at me, but I mean, he really didn't. My dad was also half gone half the time, but I don't recall my dad really yelling at me for a whole lot. And so I was just very taken back by it. And I was even telling the pastor's wife that day after the blowout, I told her, I don't understand why we pretend like we have a voice when we don't have a voice.
Wow.
And she kept insisting, you have a voice, you have a voice, you have a voice. Then the next day I was let go. And so I'm thinking, like,
that's where your voice got to you.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was like thinking, like, dang, almost feeling sorry for her, being the pastor's wife, and even as a leader, like, you don't have a voice. Do you not see it? Do you not?
Yeah, the church dynamic is, you so here's how I look at it. Anybody that's in leadership should be there because they are ready to serve. Because that's supposed to be a spot of serving. Okay. Sure. And by definition, that's what the word ministry means, to serve. Not to be the boss over others, but to serve. And if you get caught up in appearances, you're going to lose sight of who you are when you start doing things for appearance sake and not even for the sake that it should be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for Christ, you know, or for serving people. It's now, what are people going to think of me if I do this? What are the people going to think of me if I do that? What are people going to think of me if I take a break or step down or take time to myself or go see a therapist and let other people know that I'm seeing therapists or that I need healing from whatever the hell happened?
Mm-hmm.
What are people going to say? What are people going to think? And when you're now lost in that frame of mind,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, good luck. You ain't living for God no more. You're not. Now you're living for the approval of others.
Right. And the interesting thing is that I'm going through counseling as well. So I'm seeing a counselor. I'm taking my time through the process. I'm reading like these self-help books, also like I said, like the Narcissism and how to heal the church, because again, I don't want to see it burn down. I want to be able to see it thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're referring to that church or the church in general?
The church in general,
okay.
Because my situation at this church is not isolated. You know,
yeah,
like
sure.
there's thousands of others that are like me who have gone through something like that and are also on their own healing journey if they want, right? It's all a choice on how you're going to take this.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found is that I am getting a lot more respect for take your time. Like, people are encouraging in that. And I'm also finding that people are praying for me, who don't know the full situation, but will reach out to me and say, hey, I'm praying for you. And that in itself is like, man, I am loved. People are thinking about me. And then it only reaffirms my relationship with Christ, because it says that he's always interceding for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I see that my name comes across other people's minds and hearts to reach out and let me know that they're thinking about me, I'm like, I know that I'm loved, and I know that I'm comforted in that and through that. Coming into this next season, or the season that we're currently in, my ladies group was tremendously affected by this as well. So we were attending the church on a weekly basis with these women. So we were kind of creating and building like a women's ministry that had never taken place or root in this church. And so when all that stuff happened with me and the co-leaders were told that I could no longer serve, they got very defensive, because they had been walking with me through this and hearing from my perspective what was happening. Mm-hmm. And so they were like, well, basically, like, if Priscilla can't serve, then we're not serving here either, because what y'all are doing is wrong. So it was their way of holding them accountable. Well, we were then kicked out of the church.
Wow.
And so we had 3 weeks left. And so you have a women's group who is now displaced. And so even that was like, these women are now
in limbo.
Yeah, feeling the tension. Some of them felt like that they had to choose between the women's group or the church, and it's like, we don't want that at all. These leaders made the decision, but also, we don't want anybody to be in the middle. Like, but people are in the crossfire, right?
Yeah.
And so when this next season started, as I was kind of revving up, I was in prayer and I told the Lord, if you really want me to lead with the limp, I'll do it. I've done it before in the past, over heartbreak, over grief. I'll do it if that's what you want me to. But I have an idea. What if, Lord, I just didn't serve? And he was like, that's a great idea. So I love that he allowed me to think that it was my idea, but really he had already put it in my heart. And that was his grace of like letting me down gently. And so, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Being able to step away and seeing the encouragement of some of those women who have stood around me to say, like, that's a big step. because it could have gone the other way of like, I'm still going to lead anyway and not care about this hurt, this baggage that I'm dragging around now,
Yeah.
and let my pain and anger fester into their
And
walk.
cause division, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Then that would have caused division.
Right. I'm like, yeah, no, I can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
I can't be responsible for them. I need to be responsible for me and my daughter right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they say hurt people, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you got to get your healing.
Yeah.
So you can bring healing to others.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, yeah, I wasn't sure if there was anything else that you wanted to touch on or talk about or anything like that with your situation or what you're going through.
No, I just wanted to encourage people to be selfish with your healing. Like, that's okay to do. You know, when they say when the airplane is going down, you're supposed to put your mask on first before you can do for others. And that is what your healing journey really should be, is taking care of yourself so you can take care of others.
I'm sure there's a ministry in that as far as helping people that have been hurt by the church, helping them heal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there is. There's got to be something like that out there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really do appreciate you getting on the pod, and glad you reached out.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting me share my story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you shared your story. You know, this podcast isn't about necessarily bashing churches or anything like that. If anything, it's about accountability. And I myself think that accountability in church leadership is it's what's the word I'm thinking of? It's malnourished.
Mm-hmm. That's a good word.
Yeah, people are imperfect. People hurt people, whatever the saying goes. But there's so much ego in a lot of church leadership. I'm not saying all.
Right.
But there's a lot of ego in a lot of church leadership, and if there was a lot less of that, there'd probably be a lot less pain that sometimes is caused in the church or through the church. And I don't think what you're talking about or what you shared with us today, I don't think it diminishes the church or Christ, to be honest with you. There should be nothing that is in secret. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And especially if somebody is in a leadership position like that, is a completely different standard.
Yeah.
I remember when I was looking towards leadership, I didn't want to do it. I was called to do it, but I didn't want to do it because I would see what Christ was saying to the Pharisees in the Gospels, and I'm like, man, that's a different standard there.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's something else.
Yeah. Like my giftings come out as teacher, and I'm like, nope, I'm just a strong encourager. Teachers are held to a higher standard.
Yeah. And it was like, golly, like the way he's talking to the Pharisees, but he had every right to talk to them like that because they were pointing fingers at everybody else and not even looking in the mirror at themselves.
Yeah.
You know, and they were causing more pain than they were causing healing.
Yeah.
And so obviously the Bible, particularly Jesus, obviously church leadership accountability is very important in that aspect. But yeah, don't let this podcast discourage anybody from going to church or having a relationship with Christ or anything like that. Don't take it as that at all.
Yeah, I would say that it's because of my relationship with Christ that I can even come on here right now and share my story. And I hope that also you guys can hear my heart behind it. But I do encourage you to find a good church to be part of the community. And it doesn't have to be like a mega church. It could be a church from home. You know, church is the body of Christ, and it's loving on each other, studying the word together. Not all churches are like that. So,
what's the thing you miss most about leadership?
Seeing people draw closer to the Lord. I miss seeing like their aha moments, the transformation of the mind, where they can now have that fresh perspective. Like, yeah, the Lord showed up. Like, yeah. I miss that part.
Oh.
But I get to see it daily with my daughter.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
And if you're open to it, you might see it in random places.
Yeah.
Honestly, with strangers and everything else.
The Lord shows me too. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
This is like totally out of place now.
Yeah.
I was going to say that we had signed up for a cruise before everything happened with a good amount of people that go to that church. And as the time was leading up to the cruise, I was like, man, I don't want to go. I want to cancel because they're going to be all, this church, this church, this church. And I'm so glad that I didn't cancel because it was such a great cruise and it gave me the blessing of seeing the church beyond the four walls and seeing the relationships that were built over time and the community that that was created, that I get to take that with me. It doesn't belong to the church. We are the church.
Yeah. So. Well, very cool. Very cool. Well, thanks again for being on the podcast. Really do appreciate it. Hopefully you can come back later on sometime, talk about whatever you want to talk about. You did good on the mic, No need to be nervous. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching the pod. Appreciate it. Don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already. Follow, share this with somebody. Hopefully this spoke to you in some way. And see you on the next episode. See you guys.